The AutoFormat feature contains a gallery of predefined formats that you can apply to a range of cells in a single click. Like I'm looking at this data range here, and if I want to be able to offset the column labels with some fill color, different type of font, as well as the row labels and maybe a number format for the numbers here, well, you can see what's available in the AutoFormat gallery by coming up here on the Quick Access toolbar and right-click on it because we need to customize the Quick Access toolbar to add the command, the AutoFormat command to it. Click on it, and we'll change it from popular commands to all commands, and we'll scroll down to the A's. And there it is, AutoFormat. Double-click on it to add it over to the right-hand side. Click Okie dokie, so it adds it to the Quick Access toolbar, and then with our mini database selected, click on it. Hey, look at that. Oh, that's cool. Well, you got something simple, but then that's not me. I'm an artiste, so I got to choose something else that's more flavorful. In any case, you can go ahead and scroll down and look at all the different ones. And like I said, after you choose one and click OK, you can tweak it. You can change the formatting there. And in fact, you do have some options. So let me click and drag the title bar up. So before you get too far, for any major tweakage, after you click OK, you can do a little bit of preemptive attack here on the number. If you don't want the number format like the currency here for accounting 1 and 3, well, all of the accountings, just go ahead and uncheck it. It removes the dollar symbol, the accounting symbol. Well, the dollar symbol is also currency, but as you recall, when it's in accounting mode, it puts the dollar symbol all the way over to the left-hand side of the cell. In any case, it's your flavor. Choose what you like here or not like. When you're done, well, let me go ahead and choose one here. I'm going to scroll down to find something that I find. Oh, I'll do this one, Classic 2. Select it, go ahead and click Okie dokie and click off. Oh, that's nice. And like I said, if you don't like it, at least entirely, and you like certain elements, well, you can go ahead and change the formatting. Like if that's a bit too anorexic, the labels here, I can come up here on the Home tab to the font group, make it bold, even change the fill color. Okay, it's got to be a little bit darker to offset that white text, and okay, not too bad. The conditional formatting feature will apply formatting to cells when a certain condition has been met or certain conditions that you set. So if it meets them, then it can go ahead and format a range of cells that you selected. So for example, I've got my 3 different genres of books, fantasy, fiction, and self-help, that we sold throughout the year. And let's say that these are in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So instead of just $100, let's say it's 100,000. Oh, that's better. So if I want to be able to identify those months for these books that sales were greater than 250,000, instead of eyeballing it here, how about if we go ahead and apply a formatting using the conditional formatting rule that says when it meets this condition, apply the format of, well, it's your flavor. Let's go ahead and first select our range here that we want to set this up, and come up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, and it's right there, conditional formatting. You can see when I hover over it in the pop-up, it says you can easily spot trends and patterns in your data using bars, colors, icons to visually highlight important values. Go ahead and click on it, and let's start with this one up at the top first, where we can highlight cell rules, meaning that I want to highlight cells that are greater than 250. So go ahead and click on it. Opens it, okay, 237. We don't want that, so go ahead and type over it. And then with what color? You can do light red fill with dark red text, or click on the drop down arrow. You can choose from all these others, or even do your own custom format. Click on it. Choose a different color, effects, font styles. You can just go crazy here. Let's go ahead and click cancel. I'm going to keep it simple. And click on the drop down arrow and do a green fill with dark green text. When I select that, it gives you a preview. If you like it, click OK. If not, click cancel. I'm going to go ahead and click Okie dokie and click off. Okay, only those cells that met that condition of being greater than 250, not exactly 250s you see here in cell H4, but greater than, then they're highlighted. So that pops out and I can go, oh, great. Looks like October through December were our best months, where it was kind of scattered throughout the rest of the year. And then to go ahead and clear that, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either go ahead and select the range here, and then come up here to conditional formatting and go down to clear rules from the selected cells, or you can do rules from the entire sheet. So if you have more than one rule in other parts of the worksheet here, it would clear everything out, so you may not want to do that. And there are other ways to manage this, and we'll talk about that in a later training video. For right now, I just want to cover the basics of conditional formatting. So let's go ahead and say, well, either one we can select, clear rules from selected cells, and it's gone. And then with them still selected, let's come back up here, Home tab to Styles. Let's do some more conditional formatting and see what else we got. Top bottom rule. How about if we want to find the bottom, well, it says 10%, but you can change that. So if you want to find the bottom cells, go ahead and click on it and say, all right, let's do the bottom 25%. Yeah, we can do red because, red's bad. You don't want red ink. Go ahead and click OK, and all right. So of the selected range, the 25% that were found at the bottom with hundreds of thousands and not up into, well, goes up to 150 and 200, 300, well, those are the ones that are in the bottom 25%. Okay, and let's go ahead and come back up here, click on the drop down arrow. We can go ahead and clear the rules and say clear from selected cells. Come back up and let's do data bars. So let's go with a gradient fill. The gradient means it goes from one color to another, typically from one solid color to a lighter color, which is here going to be white. Or you can do a solid fill. You can hover over it and see if that's your flavor. Let me go ahead and do this one because that one's kind of purpley-ish. Go ahead and click on it and click off. All right. So you can see with the lower numbers, it has a teeny bar. And then as it starts getting bigger, well, you got a bigger bar. Alrighty, let's go ahead and select the range again and clear that out. Clear rules, clear from selected, click on it again. Color scales. So this gets kind of fun. Instead of having bars growing, you can actually have the color change as the numbers get larger. So you've got the green, yellow, red color scales. So when you click on it, let me click off and it applies it. So in the red, the lower end of the scale, are the 100s, but as you start to increase, 200 gets a little bit orangey to yellow, kind of into the light green, and then the solid green right there. The darkest green is the one that we made the highest sales out of all our books, which was fantasy in, well, the genre fantasy in December. Sweet. Let's go ahead and select this again. Come back up here and we'll clear it. And click on it again, and last but not least, the icon set. Oh, there's a lot of flavors there. How about if we do a star rating? Click on that and then click off, and so those that aren't colored in, it was a bad month for sales, all of January, because none of them were colored in. But you got something here, and then let's see, the best month again is December. The highest rating there is a full colored star. Okay, so as we talked about in the previous training video, when you apply conditional formatting to a range of cells, and you have other cells throughout the entire worksheet have conditional formatting, you don't want to clear the entire worksheet, but then at the same time you don't want to waste energy by, okay, I got to select this range here, or go down to row 50,000, column JK to be able to select ranges there. What you can do, however, if you want to manage it a lot faster, is by coming up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, and click on Conditional Formatting and go down to Manage Rules. Now before I click on that, how many different conditional formats do I have here? Well, we have the arrows and we have the bars, so we have at least two. Do I have more? Well, let's go ahead and find out. Click on Manage Rules. And right now it's just showing the rules for the current selection, which my current selection is cell H10. And there's nothing there. So instead of selecting the range here, I can go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and say, okay, go ahead and show me all the conditional formatting rules for this entire worksheet. Select it, and there you go. Okay, so we've got the arrows, and there they are. We have the bars, and there they are. And the stars, well, notice something, that the stars and the arrows are set or being applied to the same range, B3 through M5, B3 through M5. So why is it that it's showing the arrows, not the stars? Well, you got a hierarchical structure here, so whatever's on top is going to take precedence, and that's what it's going to show. So that way, if you're like, I'd rather see the stars, you could either go ahead and select the rule and delete it, but if you want to keep it because maybe you want to go back to it, either because you're giving a presentation, you have a different audience, they like arrows, well, you don't have to delete it, you just have to go ahead with it selected and bump it down in the hierarchy so it's below the stars. And then click Apply, and because the stars are on top of the arrows, there you go, the stars take precedence. Cool. Now you can also edit, like the icon set, first of all the range. If you want to apply it to a different range, click on its collapsible dialog box button. You get the marching ants of the current selection. You just have to go ahead and click and drag to reselect another range. And then when you select it, hit the Enter key to pop it back open, and that will be your new range here. And if you want to actually edit the rule with it selected, click on Edit. Opens it up. Let me click the title bar so I can move it up here. And you can change it to a different type of rule, but let's keep it simple. We'll cover the more advanced stuff in a later training video. So we're dealing with the icon set of the stars. You can change that and say, I'd rather go ahead and do these 3 signs. Click off. Also, you got the stars, and the value is set to, well, anything greater than or equal to 67 gets a full color, anything that's less than or equal to 33 gets no color, and anything in between 67, so it's got to be greater than or equal to 33 but less than 67, then you get a half star. So you can go ahead and change that. You can go ahead and say don't do it by percentage, do it by number, whatever works best for you. Let me go ahead and click cancel. And then of course you can delete the rules. So if I delete the stars, then the arrows will be taking over. And let me delete it. And then of course you have to click apply to update it. And there you go. We got the arrows. And then finally, if you want to go ahead and create a new rule while you're here, click on new rule. And it opens up. You have all these different rules to choose from. But I want to cover that in a later training video. It's a bit more advanced, but it's there. And let me click cancel. And if I'm good with everything, it all looks rather well, swell. Go ahead and click OK. What you're looking at here is my Dreamforce payroll worksheet, and it begins with Max Klinger. Let's go ahead and click and drag the scroll bar and go all the way down to, well, you can see it goes down to row 72. Let me go ahead and click and drag it so we can go back up to the top. And what I want to go over here is the print preview, because what you see in the print preview is what's going to be coming out of your printer. So that way we're not wasting paper and printing off worksheets or even blank sheets that we don't want to put back into the printer. We can avoid all that. So to see what we're going to be printing before we actually print it, let's go ahead and click on the File tab, go backstage, go down to Print. You can use the shortcut keys Control-P, and there you go, the print preview. What you see here is what's going to be coming out of your printer. So if you don't like what you see, go ahead and make the changes. And we'll talk about setting up printing areas in a later training video. Right now we want to keep it simple, and I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and scroll down to the bottom, and you can see there's a total of 2 pages. To go to page 2, you can either click on the arrow to go to page 2, or, well, to go back, you can click on the arrow. You can go ahead and click in the box, type in a number, hit enter, and it'll take you right to that page, page 1. And you'll notice, let me go ahead and click and drag to scroll up, that it doesn't print off the column labels, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, or the row headers, or the grid lines. If you want those to print off, well, let's go back, come up here, click on the Page Layout tab, and go over to Sheet Options. So right now we're viewing the grid lines. If I uncheck it, the grid lines disappear. Well, that's horrifying. And in fact, while we're looking at it, you can see this dashed line that's going down in between columns J and K. Anytime you go to the print preview and you come back to the front stage, it's going to show you where the page breaks are at. So it's breaking here between J and K. So if I had text or extra columns that went over into K, it would break it off and print those on a separate page. So when I scroll down, now you see we got a horizontal page break. So it can only fit so much on page 1, and then the rest of it goes on page 2. So it's breaking after Lance Boyle. So if I want to be able to have it break maybe before Lance Boyle, then you can watch my training video on page breaks. I want to keep it simple here, but that's how it's breaking, just below Lance. In any case, let me go ahead and click and drag and scroll back up. Come back up here. So do you want to view the grid lines? Go ahead and say yes. Do you want to view the headings? If I uncheck that, oh, they disappear. I can't tell when I select the cell what cell I'm in. Well, I can't look up here and look at the column. I'd have to come all the way over here to the name box and go, okay, that's column J. Great. So let's go ahead and bring those back up because I do want to see them. But do you also want to print them? Of course I do. And check grid lines as well. So when I go, Control-P, the shortcut keys to go back, there you go. You see the print preview? Now I have my column headers, the column labels, and the row labels. Well, they're headers, but they're now as labels because you can see it's labeling or letting me know what row I'm on, row 12. And then I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and scroll down. And you got the zoom to page option. Click on it and it zooms right in so you get an up close and personable. Oh, that's huge. And so you can see, okay, everything looks good. And then when you're ready to go, you can go ahead and click print. But before you click print, you may want to choose how many copies you want, what printer you want to print on. You can print the active sheets, you can print the entire workbook, or only those areas that you selected. So let's go ahead and go back, and if I select, let's do a teeny tiny area, something ridiculous, and do Control Print, and then change it from Print Active Sheets to just the selection that we made, updates it. Okay, there you go. And then let's go ahead and scroll down just a bit, and let me come over here and scroll down. You can print on one side. If you have a duplex printer, print on both sides. Let me go ahead and click off. Collate, portrait orientation, a letter, custom margins, no scaling, and the page setup, which we'll go over in a later training video. Oh, and don't forget, if you do decide that you don't want to print every single page, maybe just pages 1, 2, 3, and you got a total of 10 pages, then you can go ahead and do that. And go up to 2 there. In any case, it's going off the current selection. We can go back to the active sheet, and we're back. Now, you may want to change the grid line color that we're printing. If you'd like, it's your flavor. In any case, if you want to change the color from black, let's go ahead and go down to Options and select the Advanced category. And let's go ahead and click and drag and scroll down to, and let's go down to Display Options for this worksheet. And there's the grid line color. Okay, it's not black, it's gray. Let's go ahead and click on the drop down arrow, make it pop with red, and then go ahead and click OK. Oh, there you go. What you see here, let's do Control P, and that's what's going to come out of the printer if you have a color printer. Otherwise, well, what a waste. I have a black and white, and that's not going to work. And then, of course, you can go ahead and go back and change it, which is what I'm going to do, but you don't need to see that. In any case, let's terminate this video. You're still watching. Oh, you're so absorbed. No, seriously, folks, it's over. Let's go back to automatic and click OK. Okay, fine. If you won't turn this video off, I will. What you're looking at here is the same worksheet that we went over in the previous training video. The only thing that I did different was I widened the columns, and I did that because I want to go over the page orientation options of portrait and landscape, because when you have too many columns or your columns are too wide and you print, it'll cut off the columns that can't squeeze onto page 1. Now, because I have additional rows and all of them can't fit onto page 1, I think in an earlier training video we had the page break between Lance Boyle or Kyle Purple, somewhere around there. In any case, that all gets printed on page 1, except the last 2 columns, those get cut off. But because it goes from top to bottom and then from left to right when it comes to printing the pages, it'll finish and go down here and print off the rest of the columns on page 2, and then on page 3 it comes back up here and it says, oh, that's right, these columns were cut off, rate and gross. So I'll go ahead and put those on page 3, and then we got cut off here around Lance Boyle, and pull the rest of that information, rate and gross, onto page 4. Well, let me show you. Let's come up here, click on File, go backstage down to Print. Okay, there's page 1. Let me go ahead and scroll down. And you can see we got a total of 4 pages. So the last 2 columns, rate and gross, got cut off. So because it goes from top to bottom, left to right, it continues down the rows, and let me scroll up, of what columns it could squeeze in onto page 2, and then let me scroll down and go to page 3, and then we have rate and gross finishing up on page 3 and then page 4. Okay, that's not working for me. So what you can do is you can switch the orientations, and you get 2 choices. By default, it's in portrait. Let me go ahead and click back, and you can see the dashed line here, as we discussed in an earlier training video, that's the page break. And we'll talk about how you can adjust the page breaks in a later training video, but it's breaking and it's cutting off rate and gross, and it's doing it horizontally. Oh, there we go, right here between Lance Boyle and, oh, okay, and Singh. And so in any case, let me go ahead and scroll to the top, and you can see it going between G and H. And you can change the orientation either in the front stage view up here on page layout, and in the page setup group there's orientation. Click on it, and the default's portraits, so you get more rows fit in vertically than you do get columns fit in horizontally, unless of course you want to go to landscape. You can make the change here, or again go backstage, File, down to Print, and then make the change here. So if you scroll down, there's portrait orientation. Let's change that and go to landscape so we can squeeze in more columns, but we'll have less rows, and that's okay. So you can see we got in rate and gross, So when we go over to page 2, hey, we only have 2 pages. It also fitted rate and gross there as well, and it fills up the entire page because remember, we have less space vertically when we go to the landscape orientation option. So for this example, with what I have, it fits. And if I go backstage and I go ahead and I shrink up the columns so they're not taking up so much space here, then when I change it to portrait, well, you can see over here the page break in landscape is between K and L, so it can squeeze in a few extra columns, or like I said, go ahead and click and drag it to shrink it back, and well, you get more columns here. But if we come up here and change the orientation back to portrait, it will change the break line from between M and N, portrait, oh, right there between I and J, so it'll fit. I just have to squish these guys and tell them to like make room to bring everybody in that page break so I can do the portrait option. So when I go backstage, File, down to Print, and scroll down how many pages, I get 3. Why? Let's click Next, Next. And the reason being I get this blank page is because I didn't pull it in far enough. Let me hit back. When it kind of breaks, not enough to squeeze the data, you're talking like minuscule here. Let's go ahead and bring it over, double click really fast to do a best fit in between these column headers. And okay, Social Security is looking horrible, but let me double click to bring these in. And let me click and drag D out and bring Social Security out and see if we can't, okay, do something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and try it. Now, that should work because J is totally free, totally. Let's go ahead and do File, go down to Print, and how many pages do I have? 2. Fabulous. Everything is squeezy-weezy into 2 pages. As you recall in the print preview training video, you went to look at the preview because what you saw in there is what's going to come out of your printer, so you don't waste any pages. If you don't like what you see there, then make your changes, then go ahead and print. So let's go ahead and go backstage, click on File, go down to Print, and you can see in my print preview I've got titles at the top of each of my columns on page 1. And when I scroll down, let me go ahead and zoom in first so we can get a larger view of it. And I go to page 2, the titles are not going to be there. And you can see they're gone. So unless I had the titles memorized, the labels for each column, I'd be like, okay, is that first? No, that's last name. See, I'm so confused. What you can do is you can go ahead and use the print title feature to print those titles to have them repeat at the top of every page. So not just on page 1. And to set that up, let's go ahead and hit the back arrow. Come up here and click on the Page Layout tab. Go to the Page Setup group, and it's right there, Print Titles. Choose rows and columns you'd like to repeat on each printed page. Go ahead and click on it, and we're looking at these 2 right here. Rows to repeat at the top of each page and columns to repeat at the left of each page. Let's do the first one, rows to repeat at the top. Go ahead and click on its collapsible dialog box button, the arrow, and it collapses the entire window so you can see where you're going to be clicking. And you can see when I move my mouse around to get a black arrow pointing to the right, that means whatever cell I click on, it selects the entire row. Now you can go ahead and select other rows by clicking and dragging and moving it up or dragging it in, but you cannot select non-contiguous rows. So in other words, if you try to hold down the Control key and say you want row 2 as well as row 4, but not in between, you're going to get the raspberries. So if you go ahead and you try to expand it, and go print preview, it's going to say, what in the world are you doing? It's got to be contiguous. They have to be running into each other together, not separate, or having gappage in between them. So, okay, we get it. So let's go ahead and click on the collapsible dialog box button again, and click on row 4. It selects the entire row. We're good with it. Let's go ahead and hit enter to pop the window back open. Click on print preview to see what it looks like. Okay, there's page 1. We're good with that. We want to see what's on page 2. Let's go to page 2. Did it repeat? Hey! Awesome! So that way, when I print them off, I know what I'm looking at on page 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now, in this print preview, when you scroll down to the bottom, you do get the page setup option. When you click on it, you have the Sheet tab, which shows you what rows are repeating up at the top, and it's just row 4. You can't make any changes here because obviously if you click on the collapsible dialog box button, you can't choose the rows in print preview. Well, that doesn't work. That's just to let you know what row is repeating up at the top of each page. Let's go ahead and close out. and go back. And then of course to get rid of it, you can go ahead and click on Print Titles and delete it. Click OK, you're good to go. There's that. Now how about if we did columns to repeat at the left? Let me go ahead and click Cancel. And let me go to my other exercise, which is Print Title Rows. So in other words, I expanded the columns here so they don't all fit on a single page. The page break is going to be between hours and rate. Let's go ahead and you'll see. Click on the File tab to go backstage down to Print. There's page 1. And when I scroll down to the bottom, we got 4 pages because let me go ahead and hit the back arrow so I can explain this really fast. That you have the page break that says, okay, we can fit all these columns over to the left. And when it comes to printing, it goes from top to bottom and left to right. So it goes over as far as it can, and then it does the page break, cuts it off, and then when you scroll down, it's going to include all these rows until it can't fit anymore in the portrait page orientation option. And it breaks, well, between Ansing and Lance Boyle, so that's all on page 1. Then it continues down and it prints that on page 2, and when it's done with that, then it goes up to the top to the next columns that need to be included, like on page 3. So in any case, to get more technically specific, there's quadrant 1, and then below the page break is quadrant 2, and then up to the right to that page break is quadrant 3, then quadrant 4. And you'll want to watch my training video on page breaks if you want to go ahead and adjust these around so you can try to squeeze others in or exclude other columns. In any case, what I want to do is when we go back to File and we go to Print, and let me scroll down, and I go to page 3 because then it goes into quadrant 3. It's got rate and gross. Well, I'm looking over here going, who's rate and gross? And so if you're in that position where you cannot collapse the columns to try to be able to squeeze rate and gross back onto, well, so it can all fit on page 1, or you don't want to flip it over to portrait, or you did and you still got too many columns that won't squeeze onto page 1 and you have no choice but they have to be cut off, wouldn't it be nice in this example to actually have labels to find out when I go to page 3 that who's earning this much per hour and that much per week? Because if not, let's see, okay, that's number 1, so I have to go back to page 1 and go, okay, it's Max. That was easy. But you can imagine if I'm on page 3, right somewhere on row XX, and then I have to come back, okay, that's a mess. Instead, let's go ahead and go back and come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, and go to the Page Setup group and click on Print Titles. And so we want to be able to have columns to repeat at the left on those last pages, 3 and 4. Well, it'll repeat on every page. And to do that, we can just go ahead and click on the collapsible dialog box button. Let me go ahead and scroll up to the top. And we just want first name and last name, right? So just go ahead and click on first and drag over to last name, and that works. Now, the thing that you need to keep in mind is that up at the top, when you select columns or even rows that have cells that are merged, this thing's going to freak out. It won't allow you to include that. In this example, the columns to repeat at the left or rows to repeat at top. If you had some merged cells over to the right, just don't have it within the range that you're selecting cells that are merged. If you do, go ahead and unmerge them, and then you'll be able to continue on. So all we have to do is go ahead and hit the Enter key to accept that, but let's hit 2 birds with 1 stone because we have page 2, and I'd like the rows, or this row here, to repeat at the top of page 2 because on page 2, well, we don't have the titles, so we can go ahead and do that as well. Let's go ahead and click the collapsible dialog box button and click on row 4 anywhere, hit the Enter key to pop it open, and then let's check our work. Go ahead and click on Print Preview. So there's page 1. We know about that. Let's go ahead and go to page 2. Great, we got that row to repeat at the top of page 2 because if we didn't, you wouldn't have the first name, last name, and I'd get confused. Well, is that last? Is that first? And then here comes the real test. Let's go ahead and go to page 3. Okay, there we go. We have the titles repeating up at the top here for each column, and we also have the columns, which is first name and last name, repeating for each row. Well, on page 3 and 4. So that way, when it comes to looking at the rate here, $21, $672, oh, they're not earning enough. We got to give them a raise. Who is that? Well, I have those columns that are repeating, so I can come over here without going back to page 1 and saying, okay, oh, that's Marge Ross. And then of course on page 4, same thing. Got the title for our columns and, well, the row repeating up at the top on that page, and then we've got our columns repeating on page 4. When you print off your worksheets, if you'd like something repeated at the top or bottom of every page, known as headers and footers, like the author's name, logo, date, page number, you can do it one of a couple of ways. If you're backstage, click on the File tab, let's go backstage, and down to Print. And let me go ahead and scroll down here and scroll down to the bottom. You have the Page Setup link. When you click on that, you get the Header and Footer tab. You can access it backstage here, or if you don't want to go backstage, let's go back to the front stage. You can access it on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, and click on its expandable dialog box button. When you do that, you get the same window with the Header and Footer tab. Cool. Now you have the preview for the header section and the preview for the footer. To be able to customize the header section to add something to it, go ahead and click on Custom Header. Opens up and you get 3 sections. So at the top of every page you can have something in the left section, top left, or top center, or top right. So at the top of every page on the left hand side I want moi, me, and I want to be able to make my name stand out. So with the cursor flashing there, if I hold down the Shift key and hit the Home key, it selects everything from the end to the beginning. You'll learn that in my Microsoft Word training video and so many fun shortcuts. In any case, with it highlighted, I can come up here and hover over. Okay, it's not going to show me right here, but it will in just a minute. That when you hover over it, you should get a pop-up that says this is Format Text, so you know what these little buttons are about. So let me go ahead and click on it, and okay. Opens up the window where I can go ahead and apply a different font type, a different style. Let's make me big, bold, and beautiful. And let's do size 16 and a fancy color so I can really stand out. That looks good. Click OK. Great. And then just go ahead and click OK. And there's the preview. Now let's do something for the footer. So Custom Footer. Let's do the bottom right of every page, so the right section. And let's see, let's hover over. Okay, there you go. Okay. And then it tells you in the pop-up that's the insert date. Let's do that. Click on it. Inserts the code for today's date. So in other words, anytime you open up the workbook and you print it that day, it's going to insert that day's date. So let me go ahead and format it. Select it. In other words, format the code. It'll format today's date. Come up here and click on Format Text. Let's go ahead and change the color. Click on the drop-down arrow and let's do Orange Accent 6, darker 25%. Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, let's make it bold too. And then click OK and updates it. Fun. Let's click Okie dokie and hey, there you go. Now in addition to this, you get other options where you can have different odd and even pages, different first page. In other words, think of it like a book. On the first page, the title page, you usually don't have headers and footers. It's just blank with the title. So you can choose not to have anything there and have different odd and even pages. So like when you're reading a book, on the odd page up at the top, you may have the author's name, and on the right hand side, maybe the name of the book. You can go ahead and check those and you get some other options, but I want to keep it simple. And let's take a look at this and click on Print Preview. Okay, there's my name. Okay, page 1 at the top of every page. Let's go down to the bottom because at the bottom of every page there's got to be the date. That's page 1. Does it do it on page 2? There's the date and there's my name. Cool. Now you can do it that way, or an easier way for me that I like going to when it comes to working with my headers and footers is going to the page layout view, and you can access that one of a couple of ways. Let me go ahead and hit the back arrow, and you want to go to the View tab, go to the Workbook Views group, and you can see we're in the normal view. We can go ahead and change that to page layout, click on it, and there's the page layout to work with. Well, you can see your header now, you can see the 3 sections. You can do it that way, or let me go back to the normal view. You can also go to the Insert tab, go all the way over here to the text group, click on the arrow, and there's header and footer. When you click on it there, it takes you right to the same view, but it dumps you actually right into the header section of the page layout view. So if you come up here, click on the View tab, you can't go back if you do it that way. Well, no, that's not true. Even though you can't click on the normal, once you're in the header section, it's in edit mode. If you want to be able to go back to the normal view, you got to get out of the edit mode. In other words, out of the header or footer section, and the footer section is at the bottom of this page. which we'll go over in just a minute, but let me go ahead and click out. Then hey, you now have access to those different views. But when you're in it, it puts it in edit mode. You can't get out of here. So with my cursor flashing in there, let's come up to the related contextual design tab for the header and footer, the tools that is. Click on it, and it's only available when you're in the header or footer section. And you see up here, I don't have to hover over it to find out in the pop-up what that is. It says the current date. And so let's see, how about in this example we insert a picture here? Does that sound fun? Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Click on picture, and you can browse on your computer, which I have one on my desktop that I want to use. Click on browse. Oh, it's right there, computer. Let's go ahead and double click to insert the code, and you won't be able to see the picture until you actually click outside of the header. So if I click down, oh, there you go. Now it pops it in. So if I come back up here and click in the header, you can see the code. Now let me go ahead and scroll down, and the computer baby's about yay big. The problem with this is that it's so dark that it kind of blends in with the numbers, the data here. So how about if we go ahead and bleach this, wash it out so it's faded? Let's come up here and make sure that you select the code, because after you have the code selected, if you want to be able to format the picture, go ahead and click on it and allow you to do it. And you can mess with the size, so if the picture's too big, you can go ahead and let's decrease it scale-wise. Instead of 100%, let's go down to 85%. And because the lock aspect ratio is checked, it won't, when I do the height and I crunch that down, it won't squish them out and make them flat like a pancake. It keeps the width in proportion to the height with the lock aspect ratio. And that's there by default in any case. I go over more of that in my Microsoft Word training videos. And before we click OK to see it's been shrunk, let's come up here and click on the Picture tab, and the color is automatic. It's the default. Let's click on the drop-down arrow and let's wash it out. When it washes out, the default for the brightness is 85% and the contrast is 15. You can go ahead and change that if you want less or more brightness and contrast, and then click Okie dokie, and okay, that looks a lot better. That way I can actually see the numbers and then kind of detect and see the kid punching in the numbers on the computer. Now, I don't want the picture right at the top, so let's go ahead and click in front of the code and hit enter, 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 enter to kind of push him down. And it will update when I click outside of it, and it pushes it down. There you go. Okay, that's better. Now, like I said, if you want to scroll down to the bottom of that page, you have the footer section. There's the date. You got the 3 sections. You can go ahead and click in it and add something else. Or instead of scrolling up and down, you can come up here on the Design tab in the Navigation group and go ahead and jump to the header, jump to the footer, jump up, jump down, jump around, and which is a lot quicker than scrolling. And so how about if we come over here in the left section and let's do the current time. Go ahead and insert that, and you can format it. I'm going to leave it as is. And when I click out, it actually puts in the current time. It updates the code, changes it to the current time. Wow, I'm working way late. If it gets to 10 o'clock, oh, I need my beauty rest. So I got to wrap this up. Now, one other thing that I think would be important is to enter in the page numbers. So let's do it right here in the center section. Come back up here, click on the Design tab, and we've got page number. And if I just did that, the problem I run into is that if I print off 5 pages and I hand out 2 pages to whoever, if there's supposed to be more pages, they won't know unless I also add the number of pages. That when I print off should be included. So if I go page, space, and type in of, space, and then include number of pages, see if this makes sense. Page 1 of 1, if I just had 1 page that I printed off, but if I had more, it'd be page 1 of 2, or if they got a page and they looked down at the bottom, it said page 2 of 10, they could go, hey, where in the heck is page 1? And then page 3 through 10. So that could be very helpful. Let's go ahead and click outside so we can update it. That looks good. So we get our preview right there, and then we can go ahead and click back in it to come back up here on the Design tab to see what other options we got. So quickly, we've got the different first page, meaning, again, as I said, when you check that, the first page is going to clear everything that you have on it, because the first page, the title page, the introductory page doesn't have anything on it. So if I check that, it wipes everything clean. Now you can go ahead and type something in there if you like. It's just going to be different from the other pages. So let's go ahead and uncheck that so it can bring everything back in. And then you have different odd and even pages. So if I choose that, check it, then the odd page is going to be different from the even. So the odd keeps the headers and footers, and the even clears it out. So I'd have to type in something different on the even page, page 2. And if I had 10 pages, it would take what was on page 2, the first even page, and update all the other even pages, page 4, 6, 8, 10. So let's go ahead and uncheck that. Okay, now to go ahead and get out of here, we want to go back to the normal view, come up here, click on the View tab, and we're in gridlock. We cannot be in edit mode, either the cursor flashing in the footer or the header. Just go ahead and click above it, the footer, or if you're in the header, below it, and then you can go ahead and go back to normal view. Now, of course, in the normal view, it's not going to show you here. Let me scroll up to the top, your headers and footers. You're only going to see that in the page layout view, or let's go File, down to Print. And hey, there we go on the print preview. There's my name. Fabulous. Oh, there's the picture. What a cute kid. And then scroll down to the bottom. We've got the current time, page 1 of 2, and the date. And then, of course, that will also be on page 2 because headers and footers duplicate on every single page. Fabulous. And there's my name. When you print off a page, it doesn't print like you see it here. So at the top of the page, you've got Dreamforce with no padding. When you go to the print preview, you'll get some padding known as margins. Let me show you. Come up here, click on the File tab, go down to Print, and there's your padding. There's the top margin, left, right, and let's go down to the bottom. Now, let's say you got an extra column of data here that you can't quite squeeze onto it because the margins are so big. You can go ahead and shrink them up and try to get that last column. And to adjust the margins, let's come over here, scroll down to the bottom, and we'll first go to the Page Setup link, click on it, and then come up here and click on the Margins tab, and there you go. There's your top, bottom, left, and right. You also have margins for your headers and footers. You can watch my training video on headers and footers. So that way if you type in some text in the header section and it's really huge, you want to give it some more space here. But let's go ahead and focus on the top, bottom, left, and right margins. So if I come up here and I want to increase the margin, the padding up at the top to 3 inches, and the left, well, if you want to be exact, you can do 2.75. and then go ahead and click OK. That doesn't work for me. In any case, you get the point. You got a lot of padding there on the top and left-hand side. Maybe you're doing this because you're handing it out and you want people to write in notes. Well, we could do it from the bottom. That would make more sense, but nonetheless, you can see how you can do it. So let's go ahead and scroll back down to the bottom. And if you don't remember what the margins were, you don't have to click on the Page Setup link to get back to it. You can just look right here, the last custom margin settings. Gives you left and right if you want to see the top and bottom. Go ahead and click on it, and there you go. Our custom settings are 3 inches from the top, 2.75 from the left, and there's the rest of the numbers. Which, if you want to go ahead and go with the default, what it calls normal, 3/4 of an inch from the top and bottom, left and right, or you can go wide, 1 inch, or something narrow. Or you can go to custom margins. When you click on that, it opens up the Page Setup window as clicking on the Page Setup link, and we're back to where we started here. And let's go ahead and change all these to 1 inch, make them all universal. I know I could have come over here and selected the 1 inch on all sides, but you just come in here and type it. When you're done, click okie dokie. And now I've got 3 pages. If you ever come across this and you're like, how do I get 3 pages? By default, it should just be 2. Well, remember our margins were a little bit smaller, but since I made them 1 inch, it couldn't squeeze everything onto the columns. So it's going to be pushed out to page 3. Now when you look at page 3, you're like, well, there's nothing there. What's going on? Well, it's just enough, that extra little space that gets pushed over from the column, that you're seeing the space. Well, you can't see space, but that's what's happening. So we need to adjust our margins so we can pull it in just a little bit, left margin, right margin, so it can get rid of that blank page. So we can go back and do it numerically by typing it in, or since we're in the print preview, you can come down here, down at the bottom, lower right hand corner, you can click on the Show Margins button. When you click on that, there you go, there's our margins. We have our top, left, right, and bottom. And so if I want to go ahead and adjust the margins to allow more space in, let me go ahead and scroll down to the bottom. So you can actually see there's the left margin, right margin. When I hover over the left margin, you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. When I click and drag and push that over, you can see it updates it here, calls it a custom margin setting, not one of the built-in default templates there. So it's 0.83. We're still at 3 pages. Okay, I need to shrink those margins. Maybe I don't want to shrink it any more on the left, but instead we got extra space or more space on the right. So let's go ahead and hover over that margin till I can see the arrows and click and drag go out just a bit. Okay, that's at 0.89. Not enough. Let's click and drag it over some more. hey, now we got 2 pages, not 3. So that extra space that was being cut off, it went over to page 3. We now eliminated it, and everything can squeeze on to 2 pages and not bleed over into page 3. You're probably looking at this going like, hey, there's all that space there. Well, it depends on the width of the cell and where the page break is hitting, which you want to watch my page break training video. So you can adjust those page breaks as another way to work with your data to be able to adjust what you want to print on one page as opposed to breaking and splitting and printing on another page or any additional pages. Try to squeeze everything into one page. You can do it this way backstage, or let me scroll down to the bottom to turn these things off by deselecting it. You can hit the back arrow, come up here, go to the Page Layout tab, and you can go to the Page Setup group and click on its expandable dialog box button. Opens up the same window, the Page Setup, go to the Margins tab, or close out. If you want to go with any presets, click on the Margins drop-down arrow, and okay, there's the custom, our current margin settings, and then we got something normal and wide, and then of course custom margin, which opens up the Page Setup window. So if I go to normal again, and as you recall in an earlier training video, anytime you go backstage to the print preview and then you come back to the front stage here, you'll get this dashed line going down to let you know where the page is breaking. And it's between column J and K, and so we're good. If it was right up next to column I, we might get that blank page, so we want to make sure we adjust those margins. Or, you can of course go ahead and adjust the columns here and make them smaller without messing with the margins, so you get some options there. And then finally, let's go back to the Page Setup window, click on it so we can go to the Margins tab. You do have center on page horizontally and vertically. So when you have data here in the upper left hand corner and you want to position it vertically so it's centered, or horizontally so it's not hugging the left margin because we got this extra space before it hits the right margin, you can go ahead and watch the preview. When I check horizontally, it centers it between the left of 0.7 and the right 0.7 margins. And then to do it vertically, and it centers it down. And let's go ahead and take a look at it. Click on Print Preview, takes us backstage. And okay, we're not going to see much on page 1 because it's filling up the entire page. So let's go ahead and scroll down to page 2. There you go. So when you do have data that doesn't fit the entire page, like the data here, the leftover from page 1, then it gets centered vertically and horizontally. And if it doesn't quite look like it's being centered horizontally, consider the spacing of your cells. You might want to shrink the columns up so it can go ahead and adjust it and not have like this extra space over to the right hand side. And then of course, since we're here, we can just go ahead and let me scroll down here, click on Page Setup, go to Margins and uncheck it. For the horizontal and vertical centering on the page, click Okie dokie, and we're back to where we started. Another way to control the amount of data to be printed on a page, besides changing your page orientation or margins, are inserting page breaks. And to insert, remove, or even edit them, come up here and click on the View tab, go to the Workbook Views group, and it's right there. Page Break Preview. You can see when I hover over it in the pop-up, it says it'll show where the page breaks will appear when our document is printed. Let's go ahead and click on it, and we're in that different view. Now anytime you see a blue dashed line, that's a page break. And we got a vertical page break here in between columns G and H because it couldn't squeeze H and I, the data there, over into this section, which is page 1, meaning that it's going to be printed on page 1. And so what it does is it addresses the columns that it can fit onto page 1 and cuts off those columns that it can't and addresses it later. So onto page 1, columns A through G, all the rows that it can fit on page 1, and then it goes over what it can't fit onto page 2, addressing the same columns A through G. When it's done addressing all those rows, and if I had more rows where it went to page 3, 4, 5, and 6, then after it addressed all those rows for those columns, it would take a look at those columns that were cut off and come back over here to the right. And I don't know if you can see the watermark. It's smaller because the area is smaller, but that's page 3, and down here is page 4. Now to be able to adjust the page breaks around, like for example, I got a page break here that maybe I want to be able to have more space at the bottom of page 1 so I can move the page break up and have those records to be at the top of page 2. I know you can adjust the margins, but you can also do it with page breaks, or maybe you just want to do it for one particular record like Lance Boyle. Maybe you don't want that record at the bottom of page 1, but it's got to be at the top of page 2. go ahead and hover over that page break until you can see arrows pointing up and down. Of course, if it's a vertical page break, left and right. So go ahead and hover over it and click and drag it and push it up. And a couple things happen. Well, first of all, Lance Boyle is no longer in the page 1 section, but in page 2, so he'll be printed at the top of page 2. Second of all, that when you edit a page break, a default page break by Excel, the blue dashed line, it converts it into a solid blue line. So that way you can know what the defaults were as opposed to those that you edited, or I'll show you later on, those that you insert. Anytime you insert a page break or edit one, it'll change it to a solid blue line. And you'll see that in the normal view that we'll go over in just a minute. But for right now, we have adjusted it. Let's go ahead and check to see if Lance Boyle is at the top of page 2 as opposed to the bottom of page 1. So let's go to the File tab, go backstage down to Print. Come over here, scroll down to the bottom. Okay, Lance Boyle's not at the bottom of page 1. Oh, it's tiny text here, but let's go ahead and go to page 2. And then I'll come over here and click on the Zoom to Page and scroll to the top so we can see it larger. And there we go. Lance Boyle is at the top of page 2. Cool. Let's go ahead and go back. And let's say instead of just moving page breaks around, what would happen if I removed one entirely? Well, for example, let's say that I don't want columns H and I to be cut off. How about if I go ahead and hover over the vertical page break till I can see arrows pointing back and forth and click and drag that all the way off? Congratulations, we got rid of that page break. However, there's a give and take. In order to do that, we have to give up something. And what are we giving up? Well, you can find out by coming up here, clicking on the Page Layout tab, going to the Scale to Fit group, and it's right there, the size of your font. Instead of being 100%, we're down to 81% of normal, so the font has shrunk. It's tinier to be able to squeeze column H and I, the data they're in, onto page 1 and then also onto page 2. Now, another way to remove a page break, instead of just clicking and dragging, which you can do to both your own edited solid blue line page breaks and also the dash blue line page breaks, the default by Excel, by clicking and dragging. I don't know about you, but if I have to drag a page break off and I'm on row 25,000 and I gotta go either all the way up 25,000 rows or down, that's not doing it for me. So instead, to remove this page break, you can click below it, or if it's a vertical page break, click to the right of it. That is, if it was right here between E and F, but we're going to do below. And then come up here on the Page Layout tab to the Page Setup group and click on Breaks and remove it. It removes it, but it can't remove it entirely, just as much as it can to have it scaled at 81%, the size of the normal size of font. So if we're really stubborn, we're like, no, it's got to be totally gone because I want everything to be able to fit onto one page. Remember, it's a give and take. If I get rid of that page break so I don't have any, then that scale is going to decrease. It's going to be a smaller font. And so how do I get rid of it? Well, you can click and drag to remove it. You cannot click below it and come up here and click on Breaks to remove it because it's just not going to work. You have to do a forced removal by hovering over it, clicking and dragging it off. And then there's the take, or we had to give up larger font size to a smaller 70%. So how's that going to look? Let's go ahead and click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, to our Print Preview, and okay, it's zoomed in, because if I click on Zoom to Page, it zooms out, and that's even worse. So let's go ahead and click on Zoom In. What you see here is what's going to come out of your printer, that size, cool. Now if you want to go ahead and adjust it here, because you're like, no, I don't want 70%, I want to go back to 100%. You can scroll down to the bottom. You have custom scaling that you can click on. So you've got the defaults here if you want to fit it on one sheet, which we've already done. We have no page breaks. You can fit all columns on one page, fit all rows on one page. And then we got our custom scaling, and then we got custom scaling options, which brings up the page setup window, which coincidentally, close out. You can click on the link below it, page setup, brings up the same window. So then you've got the scaling, which you can see it's 70% of normal size. You can make that adjustment here without going back to the page break preview by typing in 100%, hitting enter. But then we go from one page, everything being crammed onto one page at a smaller font size, to 4 pages to fit the larger size font. So when I click on the back arrow, we're back to our default page breaks, the horizontal and the vertical. Now at this point I'm thinking, okay, I definitely got to have columns H and I on there so I can change the page orientation from portrait to landscape. It removes the vertical page break, and then I've got just 2 pages. Cool. When I do that, I lose more space vertically and gain more horizontally, and I'm okay with that because I got to have those columns there. Now, having said that, if I want to be able to break this up a bit more, so let's see, we got 2 pages. I can hover over that page break, click and drag that up. And I want to insert another page break, so I have so many records per page that are going to be printed per page. In order to insert a break, know that whatever cell you have selected is going to insert a break above it and to the left of it. So if I come up here, I'm in cell D43 and click on breaks. To insert, it inserted a vertical and a horizontal, remember, to the left and above it. Well, what if I don't want a vertical break? I just want a horizontal. Well, if you insert it, you can always click and drag and remove the vertical break. Let's go ahead and hit undo a couple of times. The way to get around that initially is to go over into the first column. So when I insert a break here, it'll insert above it, so I'll get my horizontal, but vertical to the left of it, there's nothing to the left of it, so it won't insert a vertical break. So come up here, click on breaks to insert only a horizontal. As well as when let me scroll up here and I want to insert a vertical break, like let's say between columns G and H. Okay, well right here I've got this merge cell. Will it allow me to do that? Because if I go ahead with this merge cell that takes up from column A over to I in row 1, where's it going to insert it? So what we have to do is have to unmerge it, because I don't want to, insert a break below that, because that defeats the purpose, because it inserts a break above it and to the left of it, and I just want a vertical break, not one above it that has a horizontal right at Dreamforce, so it's on a page by itself. That's not working. So let's go ahead and right click on that merge cell, and in the mini formatting toolbar, let's go ahead and deselect merge and center so it's no longer merged. So we can go ahead and select column H, the first row, and come up here and click on break to insert break, so it inserts everything above it. There's no row above it, so there's no horizontal break, but everything to the left of it, and so there's our break in between G and H. So everything you see here, all the breaks are of me, either inserted or adjusted, all solid lines. If it was Excel, it would be a dashed blue line. So when I change views and I come up here and click on the View tab and go to the normal view, that when I go to the normal view, I'll be able to see, albeit very faint, those page breaks. That's why when it comes to page breaks, I like viewing them and working them in here. But you can also view them in the normal view. If you got a keen eye, you can see it, as well as inserting and removing those page breaks. You want to see? Okie dokie. Click on normal. And I don't know if you can see it, but we're in column H, or well, H1, but you can see the left-hand side. That line is a little bit darker than those other lines. That's a page break. And scroll down, and then there's a horizontal page break, a solid line. And those are my page breaks. If it was a dashed line, as we saw in an earlier training video when we went to the print preview, a dashed line there, that would be the default page break. So to be able to insert page breaks here or remove them, you just got to follow the same rules. To remove it, you either have to be the right-hand side of a vertical page break or below a horizontal page break. So to the right-hand side, it doesn't matter. You can be in any row. Then just go ahead and click on the Page Layout tab, go to the breaks, and say you want to remove it, and it disappears. Well, you may not be able to see all this, so in which case you could go back to the View tab, to the Page Break Preview, and you can see it's gone. And vice versa, if I go back to the normal view and I say, oh no, I really want it there, just go back to the Page Layout tab, and of course make sure that you're in the top row, because we want to insert a vertical break and not a horizontal. So it inserts above and to left. There's nothing above, so it won't insert a horizontal. We just need to click on breaks to insert break. It goes to the left-hand side, and again, if you can't see it, then go back, view, the page break preview, and it's there, the vertical break. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please look in the description below this video.